And to those who think that what happened in Ferguson is an excuse for violence, I do not have any sympathy for that. I have no sympathy at all for destroying your own communities. But for the overwhelming majority of people who just feel frustrated and pained because they get a sense that maybe some communities aren't treated fairly or some individuals aren't seen as worthy as others, I understand that. And I want to work with you, and I want to move forward with you. Your president will be right there with you. All right? So that's what we need to focus on. Let's be constructive. Now, I appreciate your patience because I know you came here to talk about immigration, but this is relevant because part of what America's about is stitching together folks from different backgrounds and different faiths and different ethnicities. That's what makes us special. And look, let's face it, sometimes that's hard. Sometimes that's hard to do.
U.S. President Barack Obama there speaking in Chicago, Illinois, getting to the subject he was there to speak about, which is immigration, but before that, talking about Ferguson.
Yeah, that's right. He said that the frustration, the riots that we saw, it's not just about the particular incident of Michael Brown. He said he feels that people don't feel that laws are enforced universally. And he also said that he's hoping to bring in change state by state, county by county.
And that was interesting. I mean, that was the news point, if you like. He said he has instructed the Attorney General Eric Holder to set up regional meetings designed to build trust involving community, religious, civic leaders to identify, he said, specific steps that can be taken to ensure that law enforcement is indeed being applied fairly, and made the comment too, this is not a Ferguson problem, this is an American problem. We're very lucky to have with us Martin Luther King III here in the studio. He is, of course, the son of the American civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. and an advocate for non-violent protests for change. There is, and we've been discussing this in the broader picture, and the president sort of touching on this as well, a deep well of resentment and anger on a raft of racial issues in this country. And I heard you earlier, and I wanted to run it by you again because it was a very nice quote. You quoted Victor Hugo, who said, wherever there is darkness, crimes will occur, but the guilty one is not merely he who commits the crime, but those who create the darkness. I think it's a very poignant and relevant quote at the moment. Explain that more for us.
Well, I think this really basically says sort of what the president said, and that is that this is an American problem. It's not just indicative of Ferguson. And the system does not appear to be working for all in a just and fair way. Now, we can argue all day long whether or not on either side it is or is not, but the reality is the perception in communities of color is that the system's not working. We've got to do a much better job to make people feel and know that our system does work equally for everyone.
It's been some 5 decades since Martin Luther King stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, spoke to about 250,000 people there, and talked about his dream for equality. What do you think he would have made of the riots we saw last night and the thing that incited them, the killings that we've seen, the police shootings?
You know, I think, I don't know that any of us can really speak for what my father, I will do the best that I can based on some of his writings and the views that he took. I'm sure he would be greatly disappointed. First and foremost, he would certainly be feeling very bad for the family. I mean, he would have empathy for the family. Secondly, he would feel disappointed that it erupted into a scenario of violence all across communities. He used to say that violence is the language of the unheard. And he constantly talked about we must find nonviolent ways to address our conflicts. So he would be always advocating nonviolence, never stooping to and encouraging violence.
The problem, I suppose, is not those who would heed your father's wisdom, but those who do not hear that message. And what would you say to those people?
You know, I think that we have to use as many voices as possible to speak to the younger generation. My voice is one voice, but you really need those who are of that age, young people speaking to young people saying, look, there's a more constructive way. While we understand your frustration, this particular strategy is not going to yield a long-term result. It's not going to create peace. It may feel like it in the short run, but in the long run, peace creates peace, not violence.
Now, every 28 hours, an African American is killed here in America. Now, Michael Brown's family spoke about this broken system. What needs to happen to fix it?
I think there are some things that I would see as remedies. For example, I think there needs to be civilian oversight and civilian complaint and review boards. Those are two different boards. The complaint review board looks at complaints that residents make. The oversight civilian review board actually helps to identify and hire, works in conjunction with the community. The final thing, or one additional thing, is I think police maybe need to start considering wearing cameras. Now, I think that police will probably have some problems with all of these. But
it
ultimately,
protects them too, a lot of people say. Wearing those cameras protects the police
well,
as well.
That's what I would think, but I think that there'd be a combination, and ultimately perhaps we will get there. I know we will get through resolution of these issues, but it may take, unfortunately, more time than one would like to see.
You know, understanding is a word that always, comes to me. And do you think that there is a disconnect in this country between white and black, where white people just don't get what that divide is about and the impact of it on the black community? Oh,
absolutely. And I don't think it's intentional. I think it's just that we as people can relate to our own experiences. If you don't experience a policeman stopping you every day or often, you probably can't relate to it. Or when a policeman does stop you, there's a different experience. There's a total breakdown, and it's on both sides. It's between police and it's between the community.
But again, what is it that you specifically say to people to get that to change? I mean, we do talk in generalities a lot of time. We've got to have this conversation. We've got to make changes. What?
I don't know that there's one thing. What I do think is there are a number of steps we must take. I think sensitivity, human relations, diversity, training, and community policing. Now, that's just for the police. The other three steps, sensitivity, diversity, and human relations, the entire community needs. So that means businesses, that means government, that means just in our school. If our children were learning that process all the way throughout the school system, at the end, when they get to college, they are different young people. It's a whole different experience because we have a sensitivity to other cultures that may do things differently than we do.
It's going to take some time, isn't it?
It's going to take some time, but I am convinced we will get there. I have to believe in the high road and the best of who people are. Americans are wonderful people. How do I know that? Because every time there's a crisis, Americans come running, whether it's a tsunami, a tornado, whatever. Americans want to come and help.
They do. They do at, they do when the big things happen like that, but they don't at the grassroots level amongst their own communities. I mean, I've been here nearly 20 years, and I see that separation here that your father fought to. I mean, do you think he would have thought that there'd be a different America today, all these years on?
Well, let's put it this way. Had he lived, had Robert Kennedy lived, perhaps our entire nation and our world would be a different world, because he and others would have, we would have taken a different trajectory. The fact of the matter is we have 60+ million people living in poverty in a nation with an inordinate amount of wealth. It's not that there's not enough. It's just that how the wealth is confined to just a few. And I'm not suggesting that people shouldn't make money. I want people to make as much money as they can. But the problem is that the poor are getting poorer and poorer, and the rich are getting richer, and that has to.
But you don't see that as a white-black thing, I presume. You don't see that because that disparity is something that relates to white people as well.
Yes,
you're talking about 0.01% of people controlling a massive amount of the wealth.
That is exactly.
Yeah. Great to get your perspectives and appreciate you coming in. I know you had to battle the traffic.
No, thank you for the opportunity.
we really appreciate you
Hopefully
coming
we can talk again. Martin Luther King.III. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much.
Great conversation. All right, going to take a quick break, but plenty more to come, including we can go back live to Hong Kong. We've got that protest site in Mong Kok facing eviction. There was action last night.
Stay with us on CNN.